Hello again everyone and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest thing that's ever woken you up in the middle of the night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My computer would turn itself on every once in a while. When my parents upgraded their computer, they gave me their old one, an E-machine with Windows 95. I mainly used it for RCT and other small games, no internet connection. But every once in a while, the CPU would turn on by itself, and because of its age, it would make a loud humming or buzzing sound. This usually happened between 1:30 and 4 in the morning. So after the first time or two, I plugged the CPU power cable into a surge protector. About a week later, it happened again. So I said screw it, and was about to unplug it. When I looked behind my computer desk to unplug the CPU, I got a weird gut-wrenching feeling out of nowhere. I mean, machines turning themselves on is kinda creepy, but I usually just figured that it was an old machine, and old machines do weird things. I looked down and saw that I never turned the surge protector on. Kinda freaked me out, and even gave me a nightmare of my computer being possessed. When I was younger, 5 to 7 years old, I kept having the same dream for months. It started with me being in the black limousine with about 10 seemingly rich, elderly white men. They were all popping champagne bottles and toasting each other. The chauffeur would drop me off at my house. The men would say bye and I'd stand in front of my driveway. For some reason I could hear every footstep coming from the inside of my house, and I could hear 2 sets of feet running around. I would hear my mom's blood-curdling scream, and then the sound of a very terrifying roar would follow her scream. I would always jolt awake right after that. I've never made it past that part. The most horrifying thing for me was definitely sleep paralysis. It was about 2.5 years ago, and one night I read every single creepypasta on Encyclopedia Dramatica's awesome list, the scariest of the scary, like Russian sleep experiment, the statue, the hotel room, etc. I think that definitely had something to do with my experience. I fell asleep, but had some trouble going to sleep. It was maybe 1 a.m. when I fell asleep, but around 3 a.m. I woke up. It was a nightmare, and the transition from sleep to waking was not a quick one. It felt like I was awake, but still in the nightmare. I couldn't move, and it felt like there was a presence in the room. Many people say that they see a figure of a witch or a demon sitting on them. I didn't see her, but I felt that she was there. My nightmare was that she was shaking the house and that she was trying to make the roof collapse on me. It was such a horrifying experience that at one point I wanted to just die already rather than stay in that room where the spirit was. I managed to gain control of my body and saw that it was about 3:30 or so. No effing way was I going back to sleep again. So I stayed up, watched some 30 Rock, and did my homework. I even wrote a concept EP about the experience. It freaks the F out of everyone who hears it. This is more stupid than scary, given the content. At university, I lived with 2 other guys. One night, they both went out and told me they were staying at a friend's house. Didn't bother me at all. However, I decided to watch Red Dawn, where the North Koreans invade America. I normally sleep quite deeply and have slept through ambulance sirens right outside my room before, but for some reason I didn't sleep that well this night. So I heard a loud banging on my door downstairs. In my groggy, just woken out of the deep sleep, I was convinced that the North Koreans were invading my town. It sounds quite silly now, but in my mind then, nothing could have been more realistic. Not really processing it through my mind because I was still so groggy. I grabbed the 2 plastic swords that I have hung over my bed, great weapons I know, and ran downstairs through the front door, allegedly shouting, "Kim Jong can suck my..." It was actually one of my flatmates who decided to come home early. Poor guy was confronted by a half-naked man waving 2 plastic swords over his head. The sound of my mother sobbing and screaming for help. Granted, it wasn't actually the middle of the night, it was more like 7:30 a.m., but I woke up from a dead sleep and bolted halfway down the hall before I even really registered what I was hearing. All I knew was that she sounded hysterical, and she was screaming the word help over and over. Thinking back on it now, I specifically remember hearing, "Emmy, help me, please," and just, "Emmy, help me," and just my name alone over and over. It turned out she'd slipped and fallen in the backyard and thought she'd broken her ankle because of how terrible the pain was. It was raining and cold outside, and it was only she and I in the house, so there was no one else there to help her. I sprinted down a flight of stairs and out into the backyard at top speed. In fact, I crashed through the back door so quickly that it slammed onto the outside wall of the house and rebounded hard enough to nearly shut itself again. To this day, that's one of the scariest things that ever happened to me, period. The sound of my mother crying for help. She turned out to be fine, by the way. It was one of those injuries where it hurts and swells really bad when it happens, but turns out not to be a break, just a bad sprain. I woke up and my boyfriend is in bed next to me yelling. I switch on the light. BF's chest is bleeding and the bed is covered in garbage. What the f? BF's bleeding chest looks like it's caused by cat scratches. We have a cat, but we still don't understand what happened. There's a trail of garbage leading back to the kitchen. The bin bag we hang in the cupboard is missing. We still can't work out what happened. We decide to find the cat. She's cowering under the bed. It takes a lot of coaxing to get her out. She has a torn garbage bag around her neck. Now we piece it all together. Apparently the cat wanted a midnight snack. She opened the cupboard, nibbled through the hanging garbage bag to get the glorious treats inside, but instead got stuck. She freaked out, ran into the bedroom and across my boyfriend before hiding under the bed. My family used to have several dozen magnets tacked to our old fridge. Magnets from Yosemite and Yellowstone, from New York City and Disneyland, ABCs and 123s and so on. We were gifted or picked up at a garbage sale a toy violin magnet with a little wire bow attached. You could play the violin with the bow, and it was a lot of fun. It didn't play actual notes. The violin would just emit a single note for as long as you held the wire bow to the strings. I almost always wake up in the middle of the night to go pee. And back when I lived at home, my room was the closest to the kitchen, and I'd pass the kitchen on my way to the bathroom. So one night I wake up, like I usually do, go pee, and amble sleepily back to my room. I get back into bed and I'm 75% asleep when suddenly that toy mini violin on the fridge turns on, or starts making it sound or whatever, and all I hear is that one note sustained over what seems like minutes and minutes. No one else in my family ever wakes up in the middle of the night, and even if they did, why would they effing around with the noisy toys at 3 a.m.? And the violin doesn't make its sound unless you physically press the bow to the strings with your own hands. I want to go into the kitchen and turn the violin off somehow, take out the batteries, throw it in the trash, who knows. But I'm also petrified that I'll see someone standing in front of my fridge playing the violin. I'm completely frozen, and I'm hoping that maybe the violin noise will wake up my parents and they'll turn it off. But nope, the parents and my sister don't seem to stir at all. I just cower in my bed and sweat for a bit, and then I must have fallen asleep. The next day I asked my family if they heard the violin magnet playing last night, and they didn't hear anything. I'm assuming that the wiring in the violin got messed up, or the noise-making part just went haywire for a few minutes. But I was glad when we got a new stainless steel exterior fridge and my parents got rid of all the magnets. Edit. I'm naturally a pretty skittish person. I don't watch scary movies, and the last time I did, I was 9 or 10 and slept in my parents' bed for a couple of days. I'm 21 now and still don't let myself sleep with limbs hanging off the bed. I don't like to look in the mirror when I pee late at night. What if I see something staring back at me? I'm afraid of a lot of stuff. Magnitude 7.4 earthquake. The sound is unbelievable, like a freight train streaming through your bedroom. The chimneys explode down the steel roof. The walls roll like a mast on a ship in a storm. The ceiling cracks and falls in. Things are thrown against one wall, into the air, against the opposite, and back again. Then there's an awful silence, just for a second, before the hissing and bubbling of broken water mains creeps through the air and you notice the screech of burglar alarms in the distance. Then you light a cigarette and the sirens start. When I was younger, 11 or so, my mother was dating this guy who was cranky as hell if he didn't get enough sleep. Summer nights were the worst for him, as my brothers and I would stay up playing Nintendo 64. Like boys would do once we heard our parents come walking, we'd hit the lights and pretend to sleep. But one night after some intense gaming, we actually went to sleep. I constantly wake up a lot when I'm sleeping next to my brother, since he sleeps like a starfish. So one night I woke up and saw a dark figure standing at the end of the bed. I got so freaked out I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I slightly opened my eyes to see if he's still there, and I could see him through the light post outside my house coming through the windows. He was just standing there. Then he got closer to look at our faces, so I closed my eyes as if it were sleeping. I think what happened next was I closed it for so long I actually fell asleep. I told my brother what happened, but thought nothing of it since nothing happened. Could be a little bit of sleep deprivation or overstimulated from the flashing images on the screen, but all that aside, a cranky, well, I don't want to say stepfather, just person in your house, that's not cool, especially if they're not your own kids. I don't know, that's just me. Massive explosion outside of my window. I wake up to find that there has been a crash at the end of my driveway. A van going about 120 kilometers an hour crashed into a telephone pole, and the pole cracked, and the transformer somehow got knocked off and exploded, and there were sparks everywhere. I had to run down my driveway after putting on dress shoes, the only shoes I could quickly find, and I immediately had to become a first responder. The driver hadn't been wearing his seatbelt, and he had thrown from the vehicle through the front windshield. That had actually saved his life, as I was attending to the passenger, and she was in horrific shape. Her seatbelt had caused severe lacerations on her front, and there were massive amounts of blood. And the only thing she kept saying was, "We were just going to pick up bread." I consoled her, but she quite blatantly had many broken bones and was probably torn up on the inside. She also said she couldn't feel her body, which really sunk it in for me. I was standing there watching an innocent 20 to 24-year-old woman die simply because the driver had been drunk and somehow being thrown from the vehicle into the nice cushy forest floor and managed to run away on foot after I had seen the accident scene. It was the longest 12 minutes of my life, waiting for the police, ambulance, fire trucks to arrive. It was terribly morbid, and yes, the girl died later in the hospital. Needless to say, 'twas the most effed up thing I've ever had to wake up to, and I had to throw away the shirt I wore to bed that night, as I couldn't get my mind off the bloody fingerprints she left on it, as well as all the stains from placing it on her shoulder, where her seatbelt had literally just ripped open a flesh wound. I won't say I have any kind of PTSD or anything like that, because I'm aware of the situation and what happened and the effects it had on my psyche, but it was one of the saddest and most brutal experiences I've had to deal with. And it's not the first time I've been in a first responder to a terrible ordeal. It was just the way the girl was explaining. She had gone out to buy bread and then lapsing in and out of consciousness, continually trying to explain to me that all she wanted to was pick up bread. The moral of the story here, drunk drivers effing suck, mates, is not just for the people involved in the direct crash, but for the people who don't want to have to witness someone die while they help in their horribly effed up situations that said drunk drivers create. I live in a safe neighborhood with almost no crime at all, so during the summers I have always left my door open to counter the heat waves that always seem to linger in my room. One summer 5 years ago, I got a linger in my room. I got a request to go to work in another town for a few days. I work as a diver safety instructor. I had a roommate back home, so the window was still open, until she gets a feeling that someone is lurking around the house, and she closes all the windows with haste. As for me working away, dreaming about my bed, I have no clue that this is going on back home. When I finally get back around 11 p.m. from my workplace, I face the wall of heat in my room. God almighty, the wall of doom. I open the window in haste and hatch the hinge. I pull down the blinds, as it's still light outside, as I live in the northern part of Sweden, where it's mostly light outside during the summers. I fall asleep as soon as I hit the bed, until in my drowsy state I can hear some noises outside my window. The first thing that comes to mind is that it's my roommate. I look at the clock next to my bed and it's 3 a.m. It can't be her, as she works a shift and is most likely sleeping harder than me at this moment. So my next thought is blank. Nothing comes to mind. I sit up in bed and just listen. I can hear a large being, a man, trying to sneak at my window and is trying to get my window open with just his hands, but with no avail. So he gets his tools out to try and get the hinge open. He most likely gets a screwdriver, and he's working away and gets it unhinged. Now, it's just my blinds between him and me. I sneak up from my bed to get closer to the window, who knows why, and he is in my arm's reach for me now. The adrenaline is starting to kick in like nothing I've ever felt before. I can hear his hair moan just on the other side of the blinds, and he tries to climb in. So I take the side of the blinds and rip it up, and with my right fist I hit him in the face. With the power of a few years of Muay Thai training, together with a almighty yell, "Rah!" makes him fly out of the window and land on the ground. A frightening scream is all I can hear from him as he starts to run off into the distance. It gets quiet real fast, and my adrenaline is starting to run dry. I start to shake like a leaf, and I fall to the floor in shock. This is a surreal moment in my life. I look at my hand and it's red, blood, not mine, thought. After a half hour just sitting on the floor, I get the strength to call the cops. They show up and ask me some questions about the man, but they did nothing more than say they would look for him. I get back to my room and sit at my computer for the rest of the night, in the heat, as my window is now closed for the rest of the summer. At dawn, when my roommate wakes up and I get to talk to her about what happened, it seems she did not hear a thing. TL, DR. A few years ago, a man tried to jump into my window in the middle of the night. A situation that gave me a phobia of burglars or generally anybody entering my house late at night for years afterwards. I was spending the night at my friend's house, who happened to live across the street from me. He had 2 brothers, and we all decided to sleep out in the living room together. I was the last one asleep, and the house was pitch black when out of nowhere, I heard somebody opening and closing the front screen door, which immediately froze me in terror. Unsure of what to do and thinking maybe it was just in my head, I let it slide. And then out of nowhere, something hits the front living room window. Probably a snowball, seeing as it had just snowed. And then the screams. Oh God, the screams. A man's voice screaming bloody murder, screaming for help, and that they were going to kill him. Of course, this didn't wake any of my friends or their parents up, and it was still just myself frozen in terror, too afraid to stand up, because I thought they might be able to see me through the windows if I stood. Thinking back, it had to just be some stupid teenagers effing around with houses late at night, throwing snowballs, screaming bloody murder for the hell of it. Little did they know, it seriously effing traumatized me. I was unable to walk by open windows at night, and had this constant phobia of people breaking in and killing my entire family. I woke up to the noise on my parents' back deck behind my room. In my groggy sleep, I figured it was my brothers and his friends, but then realized he hasn't lived there for 2 years. Then suddenly an intense bright light starts shining right in my eyes, really bright. It actually scared me. I thought I was being abducted, so I just laid there staring at it. It just stays pointing right in my face. Then there's a loud banging on the back door. I was shocked. I get out of bed, and it's the police. They start questioning me like I did something wrong. The one says, "Hey, I've seen you around." Then they continue to act like I had done something wrong. My parents were in Florida at the time, and my sister-in-law was at the house, and she came down and talked to them, while I just went back to bed annoyed. They said the side door was slightly ajar, so they decided to investigate. The funny thing is, you can't even see the side door from the street. I don't know what they were up to. TL, DR, woken up by bright light in my eyes at 3 a.m. I thought I was being abducted. Was the police for unknown reasons.